Our next speaker is Mr. Jim Haynes. Mr. Haynes is the president and CEO of Consolidated Nuclear Security, LLC. They are the new managing contractor of the Y-12 National Security Complex, the Pantex plant in Amarillo, Texas, and are also responsible for the construction of the $6.5 billion uranium processing facility in Oak Ridge. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jim Haynes.
Thank you, Rebecca. I have to say I was a little bit anxious about her introduction because I looked at her speaking notes she had, and it said that I'm responsible for the Y-12 plant in Oak Ridge and the Pantex plant in Armadillo, Texas. And she captured that somehow and got it right. It's Amarillo. Anyway, it's a real privilege to be here with you this afternoon. Congressman Fleischman, just want to recognize you. I just want to say we greatly appreciate your leadership, not only in support for the Tennessee Valley Conference and Corridor Conference, but particularly for your really untiring and passionate efforts on behalf of Oak Ridge's national security and science mission. So thank you. And Tom, where did he go? There he is. You guys are doing fantastic things at the lab. It sets a good standard for us at Y-12 to meet that standard, and I just want to let you know I'm really looking forward to rebuilding the bridge across the valleys that separate us and finding some great ways to collaborate together as we go forward. I want to talk a bit about security. Our nation invested billions of dollars in the last century to build important national security assets in this corridor: Y-12 in Oak Ridge, Army's Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Air Force's Arnold Engineering Development Center in Tullahoma, among others. In this century, we have the opportunity to provide national leadership through regional cooperation to give our nation an important and lasting return on that national security investment that was made over the last century. And it's my privilege today to speak about one of those sites, Y-12 National Security Complex, and to try to give you my thoughts on how it fits in to the corridor and our national defense. As Rebecca said, I'm now the president and CEO of Consolidated Nuclear Security, or CNS for short. Slight correction, we are not the managing contractor yet, but on July 1st, CNS will manage both the Y-12 facility and the Pantex plant in Amarillo, as well as the design and construction of the new uranium processing facility at Y-12. This was a bold and courageous move on the part of our customer, the NNSA, to ensure that our nation's nuclear deterrent can be sustained well into the future. And we're fortunate that we're going to hear tomorrow from General Frank Klotz, who's the new, of course, DOE Undersecretary for Nuclear Security and the administrator of the NNSA, who will be with us to talk to the summit about the national perspective on security and how this corridor fits into that. I personally know how important it is to get this right. My first career was as a Marine Corps Expeditionary Unit Commander, Special Operations Commander during the height of the Cold War, during which time my Marines were sent to some of the garden spots of the world, the front lines in places like the demilitarized zone in Korea and the far northern NATO border near Murmansk, in the middle of the winter, of course, where Norway abutted the Soviet Union in those days. It wasn't a fun situation, I can tell you, sitting there with a battalion of Marines to defend our interests against mass Soviet and North Korean artillery tanks and troops. The bottom line is we were just a tripwire. We certainly had the will, and all Marines will always fight to the death, but essentially we were just there to be a tripwire if an invasion occurred. And I can tell you that I wasn't that concerned about it, because it certainly wasn't us, as egotistical as we were in the Corps, that prevented that, but it was the nuclear arsenal that stood behind us, and that was built and maintained by the Patriots in Anderson County and in East Tennessee. So I personally know how important it is to get the nuclear arsenal and the deterrent right. And I know that this is a mission that must be done right, and I'm very proud that it's entrusted to people in this region who've carried this national duty for more than 70 years. So as you saw in the video earlier, Y-12 traces its history to the 40s, to the Manhattan Project, when war was raging across the globe and the fate of freedom was very much at stake in those days. The United States and Nazi Germany were, of course, engaged in a race to develop an atomic weapon, and it was a race that we had to win. You know the history of the Manhattan Project. The real goal was to get the weapons first. And remarkably, in a period of about 18 months, the infrastructure was built in Oak Ridge to support the creation of enriched uranium. Today, it would take 18 months to get a permit in place, I can tell you. In those days, virtually the entire infrastructure was created during that time period. Y-12 and its sister sites moved the groundbreaking research of the Manhattan Project, scientists from theory into production reality, and into the bombs that were Little Boy and Fat Man that ended the war. We then shifted the mission at Y-12 from that mission of the production of enriched uranium and added in the mission of separating medical isotopes using the similar processes to the enrichment process. And in addition, Y-12's proven capabilities in specialized manufacturing became very critical for ensuring that the United States stayed ahead of the Soviet Union and the long Cold War standoff in the production of our nuclear arsenal. And of course, ultimately, the United States won the Cold War. I can tell you that the employees of Y-12 played a significant role during that entire period of time, adapting to the mission to once again protect freedom across the globe. The story doesn't end there, however, despite some perceptions of Y-12 as a rusting relic. Y-12's essential national security mission continues, as important as ever. Today, the site is home to more than 4,500 engineers, scientists, technicians, skilled craftsmen, and other professions who perform a broad spectrum of critical national security missions. Many of those employees, I can tell you, are second and third generation Y-12ers and Oak Ridgers. We even have some that are approaching 80 years old and that still work. I can tell you Y-12ers are committed to our nation's security. And I see some of the folks in the back row back, they always sit in the back row back there that are perfect examples of that, and Steve Jones and Mike Thompson and members of the ATLC. Bill Rice is going to come up here as part of the panel that follows this, and he's going to talk you through a bit more detail on some of the missions that are provided there. But I thought it would be helpful to give you a sense of the missions of today at Y-12 and how we're taking those rusting buildings and still providing a crucial national security role for the U.S. First of all, in the left-hand side of the photo, Y-12 supplies highly enriched uranium to the U.S. Navy to power our aircraft carriers and our nuclear submarines that patrol the global waterways. When our nation's nuclear vessels are sent anywhere to maintain the peace in the world seas, they're being powered by fuel from Oak Ridge. Secondly, Y-12 is this country's uranium center of excellence, as you saw in the video, a distinction that's driven by the site's scientific knowledge and precision manufacturing expertise. We have machine shops, some of them are relics, but they're still working, that have a well-deserved reputation for making virtually anything, no matter how difficult or how exacting the tolerance is. This is a specific expertise that doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. Third, Y-12 reduces the threat of nuclear terrorism. It's not in the business of just maintaining the deterrent, but stopping others from creating a nuclear capability. We have a variety of programs I know that Bill is going to talk about in the next session. As an example of this, let me just say that when enriched uranium was found in Libya a few years ago, Y-12 was very involved in leading and securing the material and returning it to the U.S., thus obviously preventing it from potentially falling into the hands of terrorists. And fourth and most importantly, you should know that Y-12 helps ensure that the U.S. has a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent. So how important are these capabilities today, you might ask? Well, despite treaties that have been in place for over 20 years, that call for no new weapons and no testing of nuclear weapons, the world has become a more volatile and more dangerous place, not a safer place. And the threats of nuclear terrorism are more widespread than ever. You know these stories. Iran has set its sights on becoming a nuclear power. North Korea continues their nihilistic threats. The Syrian civil war could easily broaden into a regional or a global conflict. And of course, our friends, the Russians, are reasserting themselves in Crimea and the Ukraine. And so we will see that relationship continue to be difficult for us. For state and non-state actors who have harmful intent or who simply want to create political theater, nuclear materials become the currency of power and or fear, or simply commodities for sale on the black market. Now, as much as ever, we must ensure that our nuclear stockpile is as viable and credible deterrent and that it will work. But we must do it without full-scale testing and, of course, without building the new weapons. So the task of ensuring that our nuclear deterrent is viable and credible belongs to the NNSA, National Nuclear Security Administration. It is an enterprise that you see here. It's a network of sites that include 4 production facilities, 3 national laboratories, and a test site in Nevada. Without full-scale testing, weapons are disassembled down to individual components that are inspected and tested individually or replaced before the complex devices are reassembled to precise specifications. None of this, I can tell you, is possible without Y-12's unequal capabilities for safely handling nuclear materials and manufacturing to extremely exacting tolerances. Y-12's assembly, disassembly, and machining experience is critical for providing our nation and our allies the confidence and certainty that our nuclear arsenal is ready to perform when and if it ever needs it. It's a critical set of capabilities, but I can tell you it's under threat today. At Y-12, we've got a rich history, a highly skilled workforce, a broad range of capabilities, and several critical national needs that we serve. It's a formula that served us for over 70 years, but I can tell you that yesterday's memories and legacy are not today's reality, and in fact, we're facing lots of the same issues that all of you face today. First and foremost is the reality that our government simply doesn't have as much money available in real dollars as it used to. The mix between entitlement spending and discretionary spending has reversed. We have far less dollars to actually maintain the nuclear deterrence and arsenal that we had in the past. The impacts on this are being felt by us. They're being felt as well by the Department of Defense, where our troops, the men and women who have dedicated their lives to serving our country, of course, have seen wages frozen, benefits reduced, and job security brought into question. Congress, I know, is currently debating the state of care provided through the Veterans Administration, and we're seeing lots of veterans come home from the current wars to no jobs. There are more than 800,000, by the way, that were unemployed today, while dealing with the effects of injuries that leave physical and mental scars more than ever. As an American and a veteran, I can tell you this deeply disturbs me, and I know it does all of us. At Y-12, we've seen the impacts of these physical constraints on the infrastructure and facilities that we need to fuel the nuclear navy and maintain our nuclear arsenal. We all faced the harsh reality of last year's sequestration and the threats of massive furloughs and government shutdown. Yet, while we're facing those constraints, of course, we have to continue to operate in an environment with zero tolerance for mistakes in safety, security, or quality. Weapons have to be safeguarded perfectly. They must be ready to perform when needed. Nothing less than that is acceptable. And that requires a well-trained and dedicated workforce, which we fortunately have. But it's a workforce that's under threat from the fiscal constraints and because there's lots of competition for people with these skills. It's a pretty bleak picture if you take it in a negative way. And I'm sure it's a picture that a lot of you are familiar with, whether you're at the laboratory or at the Redstone Arsenal, at Marshall Space Flight Center, Arnold Engineering Development Center, or in many of the businesses in the corridor like Volkswagen, TVA, Eastman, et cetera. We all face similar fiscal challenges. Just some of us have global security implications that make it that one step more important. So I've sort of painted this picture of our history and kind of where we are and the challenges we face. Let me tell you how we plan to survive and thrive despite these challenges. And I'm going to use a quote here, and it pains me a bit to do this because I'm a Naval Academy graduate, but it's a quote from West Point grad General Eisenhower, who said something that's fairly relevant today. He said, "Neither a wise man nor a brave man lies down on the tracks of history to wait for the train of the future to run over him." So our customer, fortunately, the NNSA, saw this train of the future coming several years ago and decided to take brave action by doing something different, combining two contracts, two sites into one. C&S was hired to manage and operate the combined contract and try to prove the wisdom of NNSA's decision. We're currently 27 days away from that, beginning that mission on the 1st of July. And my simple task between now and then is to start up a new company, new culture, a new brand, new work processes, new people, consolidate two sites that are 1,100 miles apart, find a way to bring more than 8,000 employees together into one company, along with thousands of subcontractors, pick up a mega project that is at a very critical stage of change, and make sure that we move it forward, and to be ready on the 1st of July, not just to start up a new company, but through that new company to manage and operate two of the highest hazard production sites anywhere in the world with zero tolerances for mistakes. And, oh, by the way, take more than $3 billion out of the cost structure of those two sites. So that's my little challenge here in the next 27 days to get ready. We will deliver those missions, I can confirm to you, can commit to you, and we'll do it with safety and security and the highest of quality. But I want to just speak for a moment on this new challenge of trying to become more cost efficient. You're all facing the same challenges. We certainly have it. Let me just tell you what we're trying to do about it. Reducing costs will mean, of course, identifying redundant work scope between Pantex and Y-12. That doesn't mean that either site's going to go away. We are merging, but we're not merging the two sites into one. We're merging the management teams into one. I've talked a lot to our employees about this, and I've characterized it as a fair deal. Each of us is giving something, each of us is getting something in return. This is our customer, our government, us as taxpayers, contractor, and the workforce. We've been very honest with employees that in order for us to be successful, we need the employees to give in certain areas, and the two that are the most relevant are in staff reductions and a realignment of benefits so that we're competitive with industry. You should know that the workforce will be reduced at Y-12 and Pantex, but it's going to be quite a measured reduction of far less than 5% of the overall workforce. And we've asked our employees on the backs of this to provide ideas for cost savings, and I can tell you we've seen a flood of people coming forth with ideas on how to improve the cost structure at our organization. I can't tell you that our employees love the reductions, of course, but we're being honest with them, and they've responded with an understanding that the changes are necessary. And of course, a key part of that is what do they get for it. We're asking employees to sacrifice some today so that the key get is it so that we can reinvest the savings from this combined contract back into the sites, something we've never been able to do. And you saw in the video some of the facilities at Y-12. Unfortunately, they were modern facilities. What you didn't see was all the rusting facilities that are there today. We simply have to reinvest in those facilities so we create a safer and more secure workplace environment for our employees. No matter how dedicated or how talented, of course, the workforce is, if the facilities fail, we can't do our job. And the reality is many of our facilities are more than 70 years old, and almost 80% are over 50 years old. So while there will be some gives, our successful implementation of the work will result in some meaningful gets, not just for the employees, but for the communities of East Tennessee and across the Tennessee Valley corridor. We're going to create a sustainable future here through this effort by upgrading facilities and infrastructure, incentivizing employees, and creating a workplace that retains and attracts quality people over the long haul, engineers, machinists, project engineers. And we're planning to build on this 70-year legacy of national service that has become synonymous with Oak Ridge. Let me just show you quickly who's going to do it. Consolidated Nuclear Security is going to combine the strength of 5 parent companies with the proven capabilities and expertise of our employees at Pantex and Y12. You'll recognize some of the names of our parent companies and also recognize deep roots from within the corridor, from work at TVA, the missile defense work in Huntsville, and NASA support, the construction of major facilities in Kingsport, management of facilities across the corridor, and of course, previous work in Oak Ridge. Bechtel is the majority company of CNS. For over 20 years has been the #1 engineering procurement, construction, and project management firm in the U.S. Lockheed Martin is back to Oak Ridge and to the corridor. It's a small company, you know, of about 120,000 employees, the largest defense contractor in the world, and importantly, the top provider of IT services to the U.S. government. It's going to be very important as we combine the management teams. The company on the right is called ATK. You might not know much of them. If you shoot shotgun shells, they produce those. They're the largest munitions manufacturer in the U.S. They are a company that has very impressive credentials for managing high explosives, which is what we do at Pantex, in high hazard operations like rocket motors and ammunition. SOC is a specialty security contractor that does loads of work for the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy, including special nuclear material security. And then on the bottom right, Booz Allen Hamilton is a leading management consultant who's in the business of mergers and consolidations. So the rest of us do production work, we do project work, the normal things that you would expect from the leadership. Booz Allen Hamilton does consolidations and mergers, cost reductions for a living. They've done over 300 of these, yielding over $1 billion in benefits. So that's why they are here. We're going to turn to the experts for that part of it so that we do not impact mission delivery and safety and security. So together with the employees of Pantex and Y12, I think this is a powerhouse team that I'm confident will deliver the mission for our nation and here for the Tennessee Valley Corridor. So in conclusion, I hope I've shared with you a story of what is really a precious national asset in the corridor, Y12, that's had a proud and lasting legacy and impact on our nation's security over 70 years. It's had a story of adjusting to missions over time that's kept it relevant. It's now facing a story of lots of physical challenge and a deteriorating infrastructure that needs to be addressed. Address those challenges and to create the next great era at Y12. I can commit to you, you're going to have my relentless 110% commitment on behalf of our nation to do this and to lead this effort. And it's not just because of my role as the CEO of this new company, but more importantly, it's in gratitude to all the people at Y12 that for the decades supported me when I was a Marine, and even going back farther, supported the greatest generation here, which included my father, who grew up in this area. My great-grandfather donated his farm, I don't know if donated, but his farm was taken over by TVA and now sits at the bottom of Watts Bar Lake. My grandfather was a little smarter and moved closer to Chattanooga and had a farm and died years ago here in Red Bank, just down the road. My father grew up in this area and made his parents mad, of course, at the age of 18 or 17 or 18. He joined the Marines during the tail end of World War II. He was a volunteer, of course, and that's what they did. He was sent to Parris Island for a boot camp, and out of boot camp he was commissioned to a second lieutenant in the infantry in the Marine Corps and was told, you're going over to the Pacific, and was shipped overseas and sent to a unit that was preparing and was put on a ship within a few months, and wasn't told where they were going, but ultimately found out that they were heading to the islands of Japan for the invasion of the homeland called Operation Downfall. Operation Downfall was expected to create between 500,000 and 1 million fatalities amongst U.S. troops and over 10 million amongst the Japanese soldiers and civilians. It would have been a bloody catastrophe. Of course, as a Marine lieutenant leading infantry troops, the rate of casualties were over 90%. So during the time that he was on the ship and nearing the islands, the southern islands of the homeland of Japan, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, and then the second was dropped soon after that, and then the war ended. I'm firmly convinced that the efforts of the Calutron girls and the committed employees in Oak Ridge and the Secret City during those years, creating the enriched uranium in small quantities that were then shipped up to Chicago and then shipped out west to complete the first atomic bomb, to send the signal to Japan that it was a hopeless cause, was the only reason that my father survived the war and that I'm standing here today. So I can tell you I have a deep sense of personal commitment to the people at Y-12, and I'm going to do my utmost to make sure that we carry on that commitment and actually build on that great legacy, make even a greater era to come in the next 10 years. Thank you for the time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak at the quarter conference.